point, some of them might have to run back and grab them because they're just, how that photocopy sort of just takes its own time there. She's a slow bird. Live already, huh? Wow. Okay. Okay, let's just pick it back up from page Shin Samich Dalid, chapter Dalid. You see that 4 right there? Go to the Os Dalid. Everybody has it? Tzarich lahavin, right there. And we're just going to shoot right into this. We basically discussed a question in the beginning of this paragraph, which is, what is ultimately the entire mashal of the king in the field coming to really tell us? Is that ani ladod, you're supposed to do your avoda, right? And we mentioned at length that this avoda has to be done, so to speak, specifically, strictly from you, and not from Hashem. The v'dodili comes when? Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, right? The v'dodili is when my beloved comes to me. That comes Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Okay, so we said that nonetheless, there's these 13 attributes of mercy that shine. And what do these 13 attributes of mercy do then? So this was, again, the original question from the Alter Rebbe, which this is based on, was the exact same question, that why are they weekdays, right? If the 13 attributes of mercy shining is essentially what Yom Kippur looks like, right? When this amazing revelation from above, what is the deal with the 13 attributes of mercy that take place in Elul when it doesn't create such a holiday? And essentially what he's saying here is the difference between what we call hisorurus versus nesinas koach. Translation, please.
Sorry.
Noam?
Arousal versus pushing to strength for
empowerment, we called it.
Empowering.
We called it empowering. We're going to stick with that. Nesinas koach literally means to give power. So I like empowerment. What's the difference between an arousal and an empowerment?
Arousal is that somebody else kind of forces you to do it and does it for you because it's so great. Empowerment is rather that you do it yourself, but with the help from above in our case.
Exactly. Remember we spoke about the deficiency on Matan Torah when Hashem held the mountain over our heads versus how we sort of rectified that in the time of Purim, right? That we had Mesiras Nefesh on our own, right? And because we could put a sort of legal question on the acceptance of the Torah if Hashem gives it to us too much from above. We're like under duress, and we didn't really do it ourselves. So the whole idea, therefore, the king is in the field, is the notion that the king is dressed down. Yes, it's the 13 attributes of mercy, but not in a way where he has his crown and he inspires fear and makes you automatically serve him, because that would sort of take away the whole point of what Elul is there for, which is enable you to actually do the work and therefore get rewarded for the beautiful new year in Rosh Hashanah. In order for that to happen, you can't force your hand too much, so he comes just in the field. And this is called a nesinas koach, an empowerment, which really means that when the work gets done, you can really call it your own. Yeah? So we had a question on that. If that's the case, the mashal of the king in the field should stop at a certain point. Where should it stop? When the king's in the field. This already tells me, he's there. If I want to go out and see him, then it arouses my own will, and I will be rewarded for that. Why does the mashal continue to go and explain that the king then visits you with a smiling face, and he shows you this laughing face? Oh, and this is also a mashal for Elul. Right, that's already too much information, Alter Rebbe. You should have stopped before you got too far into this thing, because now you're talking to me about actual inspirational arousal that is going to come from the king, which is seemingly the opposite of what we just said, right? If the mashal just said the king's in the field, fine. The fact the mashal goes on and explains how the king truly arouses me and smiles at me and shows me all these faces, it seems like you're dipping into the v'dodili a little bit too early. It shouldn't be a mashal for Elul. It should be what happens in Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Yeah? And in fact, this is already leading into the original question of this mimer, which was, why is Vadodi Li in the Roshei Tevos of Elul in the first place, right? If, as the Alter Rebbe said, Ani Ladodi is Elul and Vadodi Li is Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, then why does Elul spell Ani Vadodi Vadodi Li? It seems to imply that there's already a Vadodi Li inside of Elul, and now we just found it, right? It's the king smiling back at you, and this all is kind of a challenge to the Alter Rebbe, seemingly that the Vadodi Li is supposed to be later. Got it? Questions? Comments?
Question. So when you said Elul's an arousal from below, and you said in opposed to like
Rosh
like
Hashanah?
an empowerment,
It's an empowerment.
So I guess with that concept, can you say that that it's like that Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is an arousal from above, whereas Elul's an arousal from below?
That's exactly what we're saying.
Oh, okay.
The Elul is your arousal from below means you're doing the work, right? That's what causes the arousal from above on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. That's what the Alter Rebbe said. Problem is, we're finding that there's seemingly an arousal from above in Elul. It doesn't belong there. Not in the Mashal, not in the Nimshal. We'll go on. Okay, so let's look at the last two lines of this page. Dalid, second paragraph. Yesh Lomar, you see that? Yesh Lomar bir bazeh, let's explain this. Behektim shachidush ba'gilu yud gimel midas harachim be'elul. First, by prefacing that the novelty of the revelation of the 13 attributes of Elul, L'gabi hagilu de Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, over and above, in other words, their novelty over and above the revelation of those 13 attributes of mercy in Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, hu b'shnei and yanim. It's really twofold. Shebichdei lekabel hagilu de Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippurim, in order to receive the revelation on Rosh Hashanah, hu agdei avoda nailis, it's through a very, very high level work, avoda that you do. Where do we see this? It says the king only invites into the palace muvcharim shaba'am v'yechidi segula, right? The chosen of the people and the unique individuals. Whereas in order to receive this revelation of Elul, all you have to do is sort of go see the king. This is what we said before, right? That this revelation of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is greater, but it doesn't come to everybody, right? It only comes if you are a high-level person. Whereas in Elul, it's available for everybody, and you don't have to do much. It's just have to go into the field, right? And it's already there. Yeah.
I just thought of like something. I mean, if we're gonna say that it's only like the chosen, like top level people, doesn't this mean like that this revelation is not like available to like everyone?
Yes.
The work of like Elul, like trying to like spread this tongue to like everyone, sort of like not like everyone will be able to like get this revelation anyway, right?
You just mixed your metaphors nicely in the middle there. But at first you're saying that there's a revelation which is high level and has to be for everyone. Exactly. And so the revelation that comes on in Elul is not like that. It's for everyone, right?
I'm saying like to get that like.
To get what? The high level revelation on Yom Kippur? Yeah.
So I'm saying like not like everyone can get that. Like.
Right. Who gets it?
The top level like people.
Which are who in this analogy?
The people who do the work in Elul.
Exactly.
So,
right.
So if everyone would do the work like in Elul.
Then everyone will get it. Right? You have to have an Ani Ladodi. The king's he's giving this out to someone who became one of his special people. Right? So he's saying, seemingly, though, right, it's much like the revelation or the empowerment, I should say, which we're talking about Elul, is really available for everybody. You don't have to be a special high-level person. You don't have to have done anything to earn the Elul revelation. It comes like pretty much for free. All you got to do is go look for it, and it's there, right? Whereas in Yom Kippur, it's not like that. If you don't earn it, you don't get it.
I guess my question was specifically is I'm trying to figure out like the limits like of this like revelation like of Yom Kippur Rosh Hashanah. Like so, there's not like a limited like number of people. It's like just you put in work like on Elul and you get it, but it's not like it's only like the most righteous people of like the nation get it. It's just you have to put in work at Elul.
If you put the work in Elul, you're one of the righteous people of the nation. It means you care and you are running to accept God's will on you. What does it mean to put the work in Elul? It means you accept God, but he's not looking for like the tallest and the handsomest. He wants people that are interested in the game here, right? So yes, everybody is qualified to be Muvcharim Shaba'am, the chosen people. How do you become that? You join Hashem in the field. Good. Divinim shal, right? So in other words, what we're saying is the difference between these two levels of the 13 attributes of mercy is twofold. One, that there's a higher level in Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur for special people. Two, whereas it comes to everybody in Elul. Divinim shal, and in the analog, what we're talking about, who he's orus hakabalas ol malchus shamayim. What is the revelation that comes to a person in Elul? This is the arousal of himself to put the yoke on his head, right? To take upon the yoke of heaven. This is essentially all you need to do in Elul. But od chiddush. So this is one difference. Another chiddush, what's unique about these 13 attributes of mercy in Elul, ba'agilu de Elul, sha'agilu hu gam le'ela nimtzayim b'midbar, d'leumat zeh. The other thing is that the revelation of Elul, it also goes to people who are in what we call the midbar of leumat zeh, right? It reaches the lowest level of Jews. What did we say the midbar was? A place where nothing grows, and therefore Adam cannot live. Who's Adam? The man on the chariot, which is Hashem. So Jews who are living in a place where they have not made a home for Hashem, and their whole life is basically in this desert, nonetheless, the Gilui of Elul reaches them. וכמובן, גם מזה שעיקר הגילה דיוד גיבל מינוס הרחמים שבאלו הוא נסינס כוח על תשובה, and obviously it reaches them, because what's the purpose of this king being there and shining is to make people do tshuva. Who needs to do tshuva? People who are in the desert and have strayed from the path. So obviously this revelation is going specifically to them, not to the chosen of the people, right? Not to the ones who made it and are succeeding in their avoda. This goes to people who have failed horribly in their avoda, and the further you are, the better. The more revelation you get, right? Because Hashem is specifically trying to get the most distant person to come and approach him. So it's really for everybody, even the lowest. The tshuva kepeshuta hi al inyanim bilti ritzoyim. What is tshuva? It's on the simple. Obviously, you can say there's high levels of tshuva, and even the people who have come to see the king, they can always reach higher and higher levels of tshuva. But we're talking about also simple tshuva in the simplest sense, from sin, returning from negativity. Right? That's what the midbar is, the desert. The ikar tshuva hu al prikas ol. What's the tshuva? What do you do tshuva for? For throwing off the yoke of heaven. Right? So he's coming now to try to enable people to put on the yoke of heaven who have taken it off.
Sorry, what's prikas?
Prika means to take off the yoke.
Sorry, so how's tshuva taking off? Isn't tshuva kind of putting on the yoke? How's it
No,
taking off?
prikas ol is taking off.
Well, how is
Tshuva is the opposite of that, right? Yeah, it's al prikas ol. You're doing tshuva for having taken it off.
We're saying like as a result of having okay, I got you.
He said, ikar hatshuva hu al prikas ol. What are you doing tshuva for? On the taking off of the yoke. To mizeh muvan. Try and follow along inside. It's so much better for everybody. To mizeh, we're on 5 lines down.
Sorry, Rabbi, you said prikas means take off.
Yeah. You want to show them where we are? Yes. Can you show them? You're chilling. To mizeh muvan shagilo de elul hu gam le'ela shehem betachlis arichuk. So here we understand, if the whole purpose of these attributes are to make a person do tshuva and put his yoke back on, it must be that these attributes are shining to a person who is as far away as you can be. He took off his yoke. We just have, no one asked, but I'm sure you were thinking, wait a minute, the revelation goes to the desert people? I thought it goes to the field people. You were thinking that, weren't you? Right? The king only goes to the field. He doesn't go to the desert. So why are you saying this revelation reaches those who are in the desert, not in the field? He says, because the Gilui of Yud Gil Midas Arachamim, okay, let's just clarify. They're both right. Right? The actual revelation of the 13 attributes of mercy, lo b'midbar atzma. No, it does not go into the desert. Why? Those things which are the opposite of God's will, obviously it doesn't go well with the concept of revelation of God. There's no revelation of God in the desert. True. The point, what's that? opposite, right? The point, rather, B'Yisrael hanimtzaim b'midbar. What we mean is, no, the king goes to the revelation, which is the 13 attributes of mercy, is the king in this analogy. They go to the field, but they're there for the Jew who's in the desert. In other words, v'hagiloi behem hu anasinas koach l'teis min midbar l'sadeh. What's the revelation? It's the empowerment for a person to come out of the desert into the field. So the king is not going to go all the way into the desert with you. That would basically mean that as you're busy sinning, you're getting a revelation of God in that place of your sin. That's not productive for anybody, right? Then you'd never stop sinning, right? Because God's revelation is there. No, so he comes to the field, which is close to the desert. So when you're in your life of sin over there, you can see him close enough, and that is what empowers you to come greet him in the field from the desert. So it's to the Jews who are in the desert, but only by the king coming to the field. So they're both true, right? So that you'll go out of the desert and greet the king in the field. The al pi zeh yesh lomar. Accordingly, we can say, this, that it says that the king receives them with this loving face, hakavana b'zeh shemadgish es kulam. Right? The words of the Alter Rebbe are extremely exacting. It says that mekabel es kulam, which means he receives them all. That is very exact language for the Elul revelation, because every single Jew, even the Jews in the desert, are privy to this revelation. Shegam elishem rak rotzim lahakbilas b'nei hamelech, which means even those who simply want to accept the king upon themselves, to put back on the yoke, ella shem shvuyim bidei yitzra, but they're still captured in the hands of their Yetzer Hara, right? And even these people who, when they will arouse themselves, this will to do tshuva, and they say, okay, I want to change, I want to do tshuva. It doesn't actually happen. So in other words, who are these people in the desert? They're people who are still trapped in their Yetzer Hara, and even when they want to do tshuva, the want does not reach to actuality. So even them, he is willing to accept and greet with a friendly face. And so when they know that even though they want to put the yoke back on merely, but they don't have the strength to do it, there comes the king in the field, and he's telling you, anyone who wants to, i.e. wants to and even can't, here I am for you. And when they know that, and that's what empowers them, that they'll actually get from the want to the actuality, knowing that even those who merely want to but can't, he is there to empower specifically them. Right? That's what it means, that they are now empowered with an extra strength beyond their previous desire, because their previous desire, and we all can relate to this, you can desire to do the right thing, but it doesn't actually push the needle to actually get you to do the right thing. That's a problem, right? So you're still in the desert, you just want to come out, but you can't. So this idea of Elul, the king is in the field, anyone who wants to read him can, it means that he amplifies that desire inside of you, because you know that he's right there to accept you when you formulate this desire.
There was takif.
Takif means strong. Chazak v'takif is kind of the same thing. And now through this newly enhanced will, knowing that your want will be accepted happily, they're able to overcome that little disadvantage. The maniya is like what's holding them back. The yikuvim is the similar thing. Maniyas and yikuvim go together. It's like these holdback, these blockages that really, like they push you from that desire to be better to the actual becoming better. So that's what the empowerment really is. Someone who wants to greet him suddenly will be able to activate that desire. Yehoshua, you have a hand up.
Go in like the desert so they can receive them, or do they like go out of the desert and go into the field?
You answer me, because I just told you that.
I wasn't like really sure. It sounds like they leave the desert, but like
There you go.
it says first that they receive him, so like how would they?
It says first that they receive him. Where's he?
In the field,
There you go.
but they're in the desert.
Right. So he comes to the field for the people in the desert, right? It's exactly what we're saying. He doesn't go to the desert, as we said a moment ago, because it's not a place where God goes, right? It's on the contrary, it's where man does not dwell. So you won't find God in the desert. But he comes to the field specifically for the Jews who are in the desert, right? Who have lost the way. They've thrown off the yoke. And why? Because even though they've thrown off the yoke, even those who want to come out of the desert but can't, because they're sort of trapped in their addictions, whatever it might be, the addictions of their Yetzer Hara, when the king is close to them, it empowers them to strengthen that little voice inside that says, I want to, and makes it possible for them. So they come out of the desert, exactly as you said, into the field to greet the king.
So we're saying the field's like close to the desert, and just by them being there, it like strengthens people in the desert?
Exactly. We said in the Alter Rebbe's Mimer, if you remember, there's 3 levels, right?
Yeah.
There's the city, the desert, and the field in the desert, right? So now he's explaining how those things come together. Very good. Okay. So what is the empowerment? It amplifies those who want to but can't. They suddenly now get the strength that they can because they know he's going to greet them. That little extra measure of promise pushes them over the limit, which actually comes to answer a previous question. In other words, we were upset before that there was this revelation taking place in Elul. Too much revelation, the face of the king is going to be greeting you. And now it comes out not necessarily because that face is just there to empower you further, right? Because you'll be greeted by a happy face. It is an important element of the mashal. It's not necessarily a revelation from above which sort of disturbs our flow of thinking. It's because that knowing that you're going to be accepted with this happy face is itself a further empowerment. Because those who want to but can't, that knowing that you'll be accepted gets you over the line. So we sort of just sorted out one of those questions.
Is this a concept in Chabad that's talked about a lot? The idea of a city, a field, and a desert. I mean, like, I guess just as an example of that is that Chabad shluchim going to spiritual deserts and trying to create like a respite over there, a spiritual respite. So is this like a concept that's spoken about a lot within Chabad?
I mean, these are classic topics in Elul, and I guess it spills over to the idea. I mean, the idea of sending shluchim is kind of like the idea here. The Orein Sof sends it shluchim. So we could definitely make a parallel to that. Okay, going on to Os Hey. I do want to invite one lucky winner to go grab the copies. They should be just sitting in the copy machine ready to go. No, we're going to still use it for Os Hey. But, okay. We'll sort of, anyone has a question, it's a good time to ask while we're waiting for him to get back. Good, so everybody's fully caught up.
I can ask something.
I figured you would.
I still like am bothered by the chosen
Well, too late, sorry. Okay, yeah. Sorry, what's bothering you, young man?
It's okay. It's a side question.
Okay,
It's not relevant to our committee.
here you go. Those are going to be coming in handy in just about a minute. All right, we'll get back to that. Let's take a look at Os Hey. Right, pass those around. So he says, you don't need them quite yet. He says, Mosif b'hamayim. Fine. The Alter Rebbe goes further. And the muscle doesn't just say that he's makabel es kulam b'sever panim yafos, that he receives each and every one of them with this happy face, but further says, umare panim sochos lekulam. He then shows a face. If you remember, it was already Thursday. If you remember at the last class, we explained that there's kind of all different types of sophistication in this king's seemingly revelation to the people. It's, first of all, there's panim. There's 2 different expressions from the king. There's sever panim yafos, and there's panim sochakos, which is 2 types of faces. And there's also a difference in the king's yachas, his interaction with the people. The first one is he's receiving them with that first face, and the second one he's showing them a second face. Obviously, all this is aligned very accurately with the Alter Rebbe's plan here. What's the difference? So he says, now going on to the second phase, where he's showing them these panim sochakos, the laughing face. What's the difference between receiving with the Sefer Panim Yafos, with the nice face, Lemare, to showing them the Panim Sochos, the laughing face. So the difference between receiving and showing on the side of the king is Lashon Makabel Nofel Al Davar Sheyeshno Mikodem. Lifnei Shekibel. That the word he's of receiving the king's face, right? When the king receives them, implies that there was something there before he received it. If you're going to receive something, it's already in existence. V'hu mekabel es hadavar, and the king is going to receive and that thing which is already in existence. Mare panim sochos, where we say he's going to shine and show them a laughing face. Hu shapanim sochos shelo, it's that the laughing face of the king, right? Sheyeshnam gam lifnei shemara, which the king may in fact have before he shows it, right? He has this type of simcha inside, but he doesn't show it to you, because that's what it says, he shows you this face. Hu mare magale osam lezulaso. He's now going to reveal that to another person, right? So the one is that it exists before, and the one is that he's now taking something out that has not come to revelation before that he had, and he's showing it. And this is what we're saying, that after the king receives them with this happy face, he adds that he's now mare panim sochos lekulam. He now shows them this face. The first one is that he's receiving something from the people, which is that they have a will, their will, which they had before. They're coming together with their will, right? He accepts it. He's like, okay, you're sending me your will, appreciate that. That's something that you're already bringing to the table. And then there's a hosafa, there's an addition of mare panim sochos, where he's now going to bring out this happy face, that when they will be aroused to do this tshuva, in other words, they brought their will to him, he now is revealed to him a laughing face from above, which he did not bring with him. This is something that is now sort of a chiddush added on to him, which is the tainug and the schok of the king himself, right? The king's smiling face is essentially just a result of your will towards him. But the following laughing face that he shows you is the king is revealing something to you of his joy, right? The first one, he's basically accepting your will. Now you're getting the king's joy. The tainug zeh hu lamayla matainu de bechinas panim yafos shemis orders atshuva. In other words, meaning what? That this new joy of the king is higher than his smiling face about accepting your arousal for tshuva. So the king has sort of two delights here, right? He's happy that you were aroused for tshuva, but he's like ecstatic about this smiling face that now is added on to his happiness of your having done tshuva, something that he shows you that really has nothing to do with your tshuva. Your tshuva sort of was something that was there before, your will for him. Thank you, I appreciate that. And now look at this. And this is what we're saying, the shoresh haschok, where's the root of laughter, which is what is coming out over here. The panim sochakos means the laughter of the king. What's that?
Rosh Tevas, what is it?
Which Rosh Tevas? Oh, b'makom acher. Right? So that the root of schok, of laughter, hu ba'atzmus hatainug, is a very high thing. We're going to take a minute and try and describe it. It's from the essence of pleasure, i.e. tainug atzmi habilti murkav, which is called a essential pleasure which is not made of a compound nature. Let's try and understand that. Which is higher than a pleasure that comes from something which is called a tainug murkav. So you basically, which is called a compound pleasure. So it's not so complicated. We're talking about basically that you can have a pleasure that emerges from let's say, for example, an idea. If you go into try, there's pleasure that is sort of the ultimate result of a particular process. If you try and understand something, all of a sudden you're going to find the pleasure in it, having sort of cracked the code of the intellect or whatever, it releases its pleasure, right? And ultimately, this is what intellect is. It's a pleasure seeker. It's just the way that it finds pleasure is not from a pleasant taste in the mouth or a fine tune, right? Or even an emotional experience. All those are pleasures that are derivative, and so too the pleasure of the mind, which is the most peak pleasure that a person can have, right? It's like even you could say about an idea that's like it has a beautiful taste. We say it's geschmack. It's a tasty idea. Where's the pleasure come from when you're busy with the intellect? When you finally like sort of put the intellect together and you realize the pleasure inside of this idea. The pleasure is therefore comes from another thing, right? You derive the pleasure from a compound bunch of parts which open themselves up and release their pleasure. But anything which is going to be a pleasure which comes from something else is sort of a lower level pleasure. There's an essential pleasure which is not a pleasure which comes from a derivative of finding it in something else. It's like the essential pleasure in the king himself. He brings sort of an example of what it would be like to just experience being a king, the pleasure that the king has in himself, not because something is coming to him and making him happy. He has just an essential pleasure of his own exaltedness, like what God feels like to be God. He's not feeling pleasure because of something, just like it's Hashem's intrinsic quality of pleasure that is not because of something else, it's because of himself. So this is what we're saying, that the king releases this pleasure to you after he gets a derivative pleasure from you, right? So the pleasure that he gets from your bringing your will, this is something which is a derivative, right? And it causes a pleasure. It causes the pleasure of him receiving you with a smiling face. The fact that he's smiling, there's a certain pleasure in that face, but it's a pleasure which is derived from your will towards him. Afterwards, it releases the essential pleasure of the king, and that's why he suddenly starts laughing. Because what is laughing? Laughing is a pleasure which sort of, it's not from intellect. It's something sort of that defies intellect. Right? When you make a joke, it's like you didn't see that coming. If you saw it coming, it's not funny, right? It's called the punchline for this reason, because it's sort of like it's beyond comprehension, right? Your mind did not see that coming, and so this laughter, right, that a person laughs, this is also connected with the ultimate pleasure that's going to pour out in the times of Mashiach. Az yimale schok pinu. Our mouths will be filled with joy and laughter then, in the end of days, when sort of Hashem's essential pleasure is available, starts pouring out to the world. We're all going to sort of be in this state of Yitzchak, right? Which the word Yitzchak is the sort of of the three avos. It says he's the father of the future, because his name literally means we will laugh. Right? It's this like outpouring of something beyond intelligence, just the essential pleasure of God. And a piece of this is released to us upon bringing the king our will and him accepting it and having this derivative pleasure. He then shows us this laughing face, which is the essential pleasure. Got it?
It's just a question. So basically, what they're always saying is that the putting me off is like that is a result of the people coming to meet him in the field. But
right.
The laughter is a different. That's essential to the king. It's not like contingent on the people.
Right.
The laughing is like almost it's like unrelated to you. It's like a quality of the king.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. It's unrelated to you. Now, the truth is, oftentimes we speak about this. It only comes out when you do something. So it seems like you're causing it, but that's not how it works, right? Where do we see this analogy so often is like in the sphere of Omer. You see there's 49 days that you count the Omer, and you don't count the 50th day. And because the idea of counting a day is making a bracha and saying that you can draw something down, and the 50th day you can't draw down. On the other hand, if you don't count up to 49, you don't get to 50. So therefore, the 50th only comes out for those who count up to 49. So one could falsely assume that you got it from something that you did, because you have to count 49 in order to get to 50th. But it's not. It's like this gift that emerges as the totality of the whole. After you've done something that you can do, there's then this release of something that you could never do. It's like that's the end of truly matan Torah. It's a matana. It's a gift. But a person only gives a gift to someone he kind of likes, but you don't earn a gift, right? You can't earn a gift. At the same time, you're not going to give a gift to any old Tom, Dick, and Harry, right? It has to sort of be someone that you have a fancy for, but not that he earned it. And so too, it's the same thing. What you can earn here is that he will accept your you and your will coming towards him. So that smile that you get, the first smile, is essentially a reward for your work, right? He's like, you have a will for me, that brings out a pleasure that's well-deserved. But then he shows you the essential pleasure, bilti murkav, which is uncompounded, which means it's not a derivative, and that is, as you said, it's just something the king has that you don't have access to unless he shows it to you, no matter what you do. Tov, everyone's on board? Yeah.
And maybe a statement / question. So this idea of like the laughing face, right? Like I hear a lot, when somebody's just being present, like there's a state of like joy, So here, as a Jew, it's like doing teshuvah. It's like almost like it brings on like this joy, aka like the laughing face. Maybe it was just more of a statement than it was a question, if that's accurate.
Doing tshuva, particularly in Elul, right, where these 13 attributes of mercy are available, it brings out the first level face, what we're saying, for sure, that Hashem's happy to experience your tshuva, and that empowers you to do it. Mm-hmm. The second face, is arguably, something that you don't necessarily get, especially not in Elul, because we don't see that there's like a extension of this laughter that's coming towards you. But in El, there's a unique empowerment that if you'll do the tshuva, you're going to get a little something on the side there, a little addition. Okay. Last line on this page, and then we're going to turn to the next page that I just gave you. V'yesh lomar. We want to say, the Indian panim sochos ba'anim shal. What do these faces represent in the analog, right? Hu hatainu d'lamaila should be Yisrael atzma. So this, we're talking about specifically the second and higher face, right? What is it the joy of, right? What does it represent? Why is the king laughing? What makes the king laugh essentially, right? That it's not based on something per se, but what triggers it to come out? And we're saying here something very cool. It's the pleasure that the king has in the Jews themselves. In other words, it's a pleasure that he has in them, which is higher than the pleasure he has from their actual work, from their service, from their Torah and mitzvahs.
Why does he have his pleasure so much just of existing?
Hang one second. Yeah, we could take a look at this footnote. Just take a look at footnote 21 for a second. He says, "Ma'tamim al ma'alas the bal tshuva al tzadikim." What is amongst the reasons that there's a quality of bal tshuvas over tzadikim? He should tshuva ba mitzad haneshama. It's because the tshuva comes from the neshama. Shlemayla mitorah, right? The soul itself is before Torah, right? It says when Hashem created the world, Yisrael alu b'machshava, the Jewish people went up in thought, meaning he thought of us even before he thought of the Torah, right? So therefore, the tzaddik who's beloved by Hashem because he always does the right thing, he keeps the Torah, etc. Hashem he is essentially loving him because of his fulfillment of Torah. The Baal Tshuva, he's jumping to a state which is actually higher than the Torah. Why? Because he broke the Torah, and when he comes back, it's not just that he's reassociated himself with the Torah, it's that he's reassociated himself with the giver of the Torah, and he sort of made himself his own soul beloved to Hashem. So this is one of the reasons the Baal Tshuva is more beloved. L'chein aydei tshuva misgalis achar kach hamayla d'Yisrael atzmam. Therefore, when a Jew does tshuva, we see that it reveals a certain love that Hashem has for the Jewish people themselves. Not them as an agent of something they accomplish for Hashem, but just they themselves. Turning the page, however, the doing of tshuva is still just a preface for the revelation of the belovedness of the Jews themselves. Because the soul itself is even higher than tshuva. In other words, they do tshuva, which let's say the tshuva is higher than the Torah mitzvahs themselves. Right? There's three levels here. There's the actual doing of the service. Then there's what happens if you fail to do the service. When you come back, that means Hashem was not just interested in the service, he was interested in you, because the fact that you came back and did tshuva, right, means you failed to do the service, but you jumped into this higher level called tshuva. But the tshuva itself is something that you still do. But the tshuva, it reveals that there's something beloved about you beyond that which you do. So the Baal Tshuva reveals the essential love that God has for the Jewish people themselves. So going back inside, right, we're saying that this laughing face, what is Hashem laughing about? What does he love so much? It is the Jews themselves. Shalamayla mitainuk, it's higher than the tainuk that he gets from the work that they do from the Torah mitzvahs. Lamayla gama tainuk shemavodas tshuva. It's even higher than the avodah of tshuva, which tshuva is higher than the regular work that a person does, right? Because when you're doing tshuva, you're not just facing Hashem at the point of His commandment, right? You're facing Hashem higher than His commandments, because you have to say, Hashem, I'm sorry I didn't fulfill your commandments. Will you still love me? So who are you addressing at that point? You're not just taking on the responsibilities that the king has placed on you. You're going in, forging a direct connection with the king himself when you do tshuva, because you have to, because you missed your connection with him at the point of his command. So tshuva itself forges a bond which is higher than the bond you forge with just doing regular Torah mitzvahs. But tshuva is still a certain action that you're performing, right? Which could be put as like his love of that is still based on something that you did. But the fact that tshuva, then Hashem says, okay, I'll accept your tshuva, that shows you He's not just loving you because you accepted your tshuva, He's loving you because of you. He just loves you, and therefore He accepts your tshuva. So tshuva itself reveals an essential love that Hashem has for a Jew, irregardless of what he does or does not do. And therefore, this laughing face of the king is a revelation which is essentially, I love you, right? Even not because of what you provide for me, or even the fact that you feel bad when you didn't provide it and you want to reconnect. Why am I even accepting your reconnection? Because I essentially love you. This is what gets revealed.
Even higher than his pleasure, the king's pleasure.
No, it is the king's ultimate pleasure. There's two levels of pleasure of the king. There's a pleasure which is we're calling a derivative, which is what you do for him gives him pleasure. But then what we're really revealing in the second level of the laughing face is that there's a pleasure which is irregardless of what you do for him, he just loves you, essentially loves you. Yehoshua.
Why do we say Baal Tshuvas and not Rishonim?
Why do you say Baal Tshuvas what?
And not like Russians, like they aren't like doing any work yet. Wouldn't they be like a bigger if Hashem loves them, they're not like doing anything for him?
It is basically for the Rasha. Why does Hashem love the Rasha so much though? It's because deep down inside, we're going to soon see this inside, deep down inside of this Rasha, if he's a Jew, he loves Hashem. So no matter how far he falls away, and on the contrary, the farther he falls away, the more he reveals his essential love of God, because he will come back no matter how far away he is. And that bond that they have, that is what makes Hashem love him intrinsically. Right, because you love me intrinsically, I love you intrinsically, and it goes both ways. The Jew also winds up loving God intrinsically because Hashem has this irrational love for him, and this can be concealed in the tzaddik, because the tzaddik, you might say, Hashem loves him because he did something for him, right? The Baal Tshuva, which is really the Rasha, as you're saying, he doesn't love him because he did something for him. He loves him because the Rasha actually intrinsically loves Hashem. When does it get revealed? When he does tshuva. When does it get revealed? When he does tshuva, right? If he doesn't do tshuva, that essential love that you has inside of him for God is still, it doesn't yet elicit the love of the king. I'm answering your question. That's why it doesn't say he loves the Rasha, because he doesn't love the Rasha when he loves the Rasha, because the Rasha has a yid inside of him which will essentially never fall so far away that he doesn't implicitly love Hashem, like no matter what. When that shows, which is called through the mitzvah of tshuva, it shows up his true in essential self. So that's what elicits. Hashem says, see, I love this guy. You can't get away from it. It's not because he did tshuva that he loves. You understand? The fact that he did tshuva revealed that even before he did tshuva, he had an essential love. If he didn't, what's making him do tshuva? He's not listening to anybody's commands, right? Obviously, he's like separated himself to the most. All the king did was come to the field. right? He didn't arouse him or anything. The king did by coming to the field was he reminded the Jew that his essential love was for Hashem. He does tshuva, which reveals that his essential love was for Hashem, even when he was a Rasha. So it's the same thing you asked before. We can't say that the king goes into the desert. Because no, the king does not like the desert. He doesn't like the Jew when he's in a state of sin. But he loves that Jew anyway, because he knows if he just comes a little close, the Jew's going to run out of the desert and see him. He says, and Hashem says, why? Why do you love me so much? It's irrational. So Hashem brings out his irrational love. This is something they share for each other. There's no reason why this Jew loves Hashem. It's not because of this and it's not because of that. It's just his Yisrael, like we said in the previous mimer, right? He has a nature that this level of kale ministers inside of him in a continuous way. And therefore, when that shows up, Hashem also laughs irrationally because he's like, this is just ridiculous. Why does this Jew love me so much? No matter where you are, no matter how much you're enjoying the desert, etc., when I just come to the field, you just show me your intrinsic love for me. That then erupts a laughter in Hashem, which is his intrinsic pleasure in us, which also makes no sense. It's kind of this thing that we share with each other. We're stuck with each other, like a father and son, right? You just love your son at some level, no matter what, even if he's doing horrible things, right? Because he's your son. You can't get away from it. Now, when he kind of like does tshuva, you're happy, right? To the point that he found his true self. You don't show a face of love when he's in the middle of doing horrible things, chas v'shalom, but you love him anyway, right? And ultimately, it's because you know that inside that's not really who he is. And when you come close to him, he reveals that true self. Anyway. You follow? Okay. Fine. So, this laughing face is even above the pleasure certainly above the pleasure of fulfilling the Torah mitzvahs, which is basically showing your will for Hashem, but even above the mitzvah of tshuva, because tshuva is also a thing you can say is producing this laughter. But it's not. It's just an essential love. It's the tainug of the atzmus itself. Now, before we get to this point, there was a subtle question the Rebbe's answering in this line. Let me go back to our one question we already answered. We were bothered by the fact that there seems to be an ani ledod, there seems to be a v'dodili in Elul too much, right? That's how we started the class. That the fact that the king is showing you these faces in Elul seems to be more than an empowerment. It's already a full-on arousal. So the first face, we answered already. We said the fact that he's showing you this happy face is not really an arousal at all. It goes with the empowerment muscle. Why? Because the idea is that it's going for this particular person who wants to get out of the desert, can't, despite his own wish to do so, because he's trapped in his Yetzer Hara. When he knows the king is close in the field, that gives him just enough, and showing a smiling face to anyone who wants to go see him. So the smiling face is actually, at the end of the day, not an arousal, but still merely an empowerment, because it's just empowering that person who wants to but can't. So we took away the arousal aspect, and we sort of put it back into the empowerment category by explaining that it's not actually showing any revelation to this person. He's just amplifying his own will, which he couldn't muster on his own. But now, is everyone good with that? But now we have the second face, which is very hard to explain away that this is some kind of an arousal, because he's showing you this laughing face, which it's very hard to understand. This is anything but a full-blown revelation of the infinite pleasure of Hashem, which you don't deserve and you didn't do anything for. So isn't that an empowerment? So now this next line, he comes to explain that even the laughing face, which is this essential pleasure, is also merely an empowerment. I meant that, isn't that seeming like an arousal? And he's going to explain now why it's only also merely an empowerment, not a full-blown arousal. Even the laughing face. This is what he's doing. He's going through these two phases. First, convincing us that they were arousals and therefore interfering with the mashal of Elul. And then he explains how they're actually both empowerments, and therefore he sort of saves the Alter Rebbe's mashal that it really is still dealing with the Indian of mere empowerment. So how does he do this in the second stage now? What's that? Yeah, this that he shows them this laughing face. In other words, that this infinite joy of God, right, which is going which gets aroused in God when the man arouses himself to do tshuva. He's now basically being seen this vision that if he'll do tshuva, he'll get this infinite pleasure of God that loves him just because of him. So what this does to this person, when he sees that the king loves him intrinsically, and that if he just does tshuva, his tshuva will be accepted. Why will his tshuva be accepted? Because Hashem just intrinsically loves him. That itself reminds him that he intrinsically loves Hashem. Therefore, someone who is stuck in their Yetzer Hara, and he just wants to come, but he can't. So first he's told, your tshuva will be accepted. And then he's told, I love you even beyond the state of tshuva. This is the ultimate empowerment of this person, because he realizes at the end of the day, all I want is you. This amplifies his empowerment to go over those impediments and to do the proper tshuva. So really, he breaks it down that all these things were merely empowerments. Because the person is so blocked that even though he wants to serve Hashem, it's not enough, right? The want has to be empowered, right? Because he, as we all know, unfortunately, you can want to do a lot of good things, and you really do want them, but you're like enchained by your Yetzer Hara, right? You want to get out of bed in the morning, but you don't, right? Sometimes you do. And you come and you say, something happened. I was like empowered in some crazy way. I overcame this obstacle that I've been working on for, what happened? Elul happened to you. And so on one hand, spiritually speaking, the king is in the field. You know that your will is going to be accepted immediately, so that gives your will a little kick in the tuchas and gets it stronger. And more than that, you go and you say that when my will is, you see from this mashal, and there's some kind of a spiritual experience of this, obviously, that when your will is going to be accepted, it's going to unleash a whole nother thing, which is Hashem loves you beyond anything you could even do. He just intrinsically loves you. What does that do for you? That makes you remember that you love Hashem intrinsically for no reason, and that really gives a kick to your will, because you're like, I have no other will but you. All I love is you. So really, it's all an empowerment, right? None of this actually happened. It's just your knowledge that these things are going to be coming your way if you determine to stay steadfast in this will that you had, which all the other months of the year, it wasn't enough to actually push you over the limit. Suddenly having these two faces, which is the pleasure and the ultimate pleasure, empowers you to the ultimate to be able to actually do what needs to be done, and therefore it is an Elul mashal in the end of the day. Even the faces are an Elul mashal because they empower your will to the fullest, even to the point of making you realize that you have no other will but God. And